Hello, and welcome to Blythe Coffee Break, the podcast where queer culture, pop chaos, mythology, and a very strong cup of coffee all meet at the same table. I'm Jemma Blythe, your resident cultural overthinker, media romantic, and professional noticer of things that are definitely not that deep until they absolutely are. Each episode will spill the hottest queer headlines, unpack the stories shaping how we love, live, and see ourselves on screen. And because we're nothing if not a little dramatic, trace those moments back to the myths and archetypes we've been rewriting for centuries. Think of this as your midweek catch-up with a friend who reads too much into TV storylines, quotes folklore at inappropriate times, and believes that queer media isn't just entertainment, it's cultural history in real time. So, grab your drink of choice, get comfortable, and let's take a little coffee break, the Blythe way. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to season 2 of Blythe Coffee Break. You may notice that things are a little different around here, and that's because Blythe Coffee Break has had a little bit of a makeover. And I can't delve into this week's episode without shouting out Tiffany Marie _E on Instagram for giving me her coffee order this week. So, Tiffany Marie, what have you ordered? Tiffany Marie has ordered a white caramel iced latte with oat milk. I love the sound of that. Love it. Doesn't quite suit the hot sip, but I have a hot sip of my own here. Just right to drink, actually. But without further ado, get comfortable because we're about to sink in to today's hot sip. So, throughout soap headlines, on TV and music and everything else, we have what I think is a first for a soap in this country. No, I'm not talking about Swallow in Coronation Street. I am talking about Oscar Branning in EastEnders. So, let's delve in. What is he going to be up to? We know that he's with Jasmine currently. And we know that things between them have been quite rocky. But now there's this new thing with Jasmine. It's her brother. Now, we've always known that Kat's daughter had 2 children. One was believed to have been dead, but the other was believed to have been alive. We found out at Christmas that that wasn't the case. And now we know it definitely isn't the case because Jasmine is still very much alive. And it would seem that her brother is too, and that he is on the way to the square to, let's say, put another line in the triangle between Oscar and Jasmine. So it looks as though we're going to get our first bisexual representation of a love triangle. How exciting is that? I mean, if anybody doesn't want to see Brannings come under, to use the Bridgerton phrase, scandal on the square, I mean, it's going to be epic. I so cannot wait for that. But not only that, But doesn't that quite clearly say where things are going with modern desire on TV and how much representation that is going to bring to so many who are maybe unsure of where they sit and unsure of how they feel, but to have that sense of it's okay, it's recognized. I'm not strange, or I don't have to be ashamed of who I am. There's something deeply powerful in that. So that's going to be incredible. I cannot wait to see that play out. And I also cannot delve into this week's episode, well, today's episode, without saying that we've just come out of the back of Queer History Month in February. And queer history is a thing on TikTok. I did a deep dive for this week's episode because I wanted to know what was going on TikTok. Things get buried on social media, guys. Things get buried, and queer history is absolutely one of the things to get buried. Not anymore. Not with me around. No. I found throughout looking, and I will drop their username because I think it's important, just like I did Tiffany Marie's. Thank you, Tiff. So let's go in and check, shall we? Before I move on. Here we go. Jane Casey did a little piece on Irish history. She covers predominantly Irish history on TikTok. And she actually put this video up on the 5th of May last year. And I only saw it through doing a deep dive. Guys, we need to be on TikTok doing deep dives. And it's just absolutely amazing, the things that she's put up. So go and check her out, Jane Casey on TikTok, or at janecasey.ie on TikTok. Go check her out. So this episode is aimed to look at how queer people shaped science before we could safely exist. Think about what that means. We shaped science even before we could safely exist. Now, that leads me on nicely to this week's Deep Brew, which, yes, is the main topic of the pod. And it's what happens when we start to recognize that queer people didn't just survive history, we engineered history. And this year, LGBT History Month was aimed at science and innovation. So that means looking at the people who invented things, people who curated different things with creativity and just a little bit of brain power. Well, more than a little bit, if I'm honest. But isn't it incredible? Because back then in America, the UK, being gay was very much illegal. It was a taboo thing. So different queer contributions throughout history are very often brushed off as just another historical figure. But isn't it about time that things changed? Isn't it about time that we started looking at people and thinking, do you know what? You were pretty damn incredible. And nobody said anything. Nobody stood up for you until you died. And it's just awful thinking about it like that. So I've got 3 people written down. Mary Anning. Now, some of you will know Mary Anning from the film Ammonite. Those of you who don't, she was seen as, the first female fossil hunter in the UK. I learned about Mary Anning in primary school. I was into dinosaurs. Okay, that was my hyperfixation, hyperfocus, hyper everything. Dinosaurs. And I remember reading about her and hearing about her and how she discovered the first complete ichthyosaur down on what is now called the Dinosaur Coast in the UK. So it's pretty incredible what she did. But that was the first and last time I'd heard of her until I actually went to the Natural History Museum. I want to say I was about 10 or 11 when I did that for the first time. And I was starstruck, not by Mary Anning, because she was mentioned in tiny, tiny little letters, but by the ichthyosaur that was up on the wall. And that's the first time that I can remember being starstruck by anything. And it felt goddamn incredible to see her work recognized. And back then, I even knew that it was unusual for a woman to do fossil hunting, even though miraculously I wanted to do it. And I still want to do it. And I've never been. I'm going to have to do it. I have to go. It was just incredible to see that. So that's the first time I recognized that since primary school and reading about it and hearing about her. And now, of course, you can watch Ammonite, starring Kate Winslet, I believe. Many gay women know about Kate Winslet. But it was just incredible. And I so need to sit and watch Ammonite because I haven't watched it yet. I need to do that. And then, of course, I'm going to go on to Ada Lovelace. And Ada Lovelace was a, shall I call it, mathematician. She was the first one that actually recognized that computers could be used for different things. And again, no sodding clue about Ada Lovelace. And I bet the majority of you gorgeous listeners don't know about her either. And again, a woman believed to be gay, history buried. And it shouldn't take LGBT History Month with the subject of science and innovation to bring these historical figures to light. But it does. Every year. Why is that? So moving on from Ada Lovelace, and I learned about her in college. I did computer science at college, and many people think, oh my God, you did computer science at college. I've never once used that qualification. Never once in my life have I had to use computer science. Not once. Was I treated a little bit sexist at the first college? Yes, I was, because I was the only girl there on computer science. I started with 3 girls on my course and 2 left, leaving just me. I didn't mind that. I managed to forge my own path and find my own way through with incredible people. So yeah, I learned about Ada Lovelace, and thank goodness I did, because I looked up to her in college. Having known that another woman went through exactly what I was going through at the time, guided me through. And the fact that she managed to do it when the UK was still very much a woman's worst nightmare, I'm going to say, because everything was led by men at that time, especially when it came to science and innovation, or STEM subjects as we call them now. But of course, I cannot move on from this until I've mentioned Alan Turing, who worked at Bletchley Park down in Milton Keynes, or on the outskirts of, during World War II. He graduated from King's College and he was a whiz at solving puzzles. It irritated him when he couldn't solve puzzles. So when the German codes came along, he worked on a machine to decrypt them. And he did that surrounded by a team at Bletchley Park. It was highly, highly secretive. And you can see all this play out in the film The Imitation Game, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. And I cannot recommend that film enough. It was incredible to see how he would have been treated back then. Of course, he died at the age of 41 from cyanide poisoning. And again, he was ashamed. He was so deeply ashamed. He was arrested and he went through chemical castration. It took his brain power. It took everything from him. And of course, I learned about this in secondary school in drama. And I had to do a piece on, well, linked to Alan Turing. So I did. I starred, directed, wrote, along with 2 other amazing people. And it was incredible. Drama is where I found freedom in school. It felt amazing to be able to get my point out there without actually saying it as me, but as another character. Somebody completely different to me was amazing. I cannot tell you. So without those people, without those incredible humans, where would we be? I mean, where would we actually be? I mean, I know that AI probably wouldn't have been this massive thing that's come to take over the world and creative careers. I'm not going to get into that. I could go on for weeks, days, hours. Yeah, not good. But yeah, how strange. So I'm from history to a completely different type of history now. And those of you who are familiar with Blythe Coffee Break well know mythology plays a part. So I think it's time for today's myth drop. And because every queer storyline today echoes a myth we've been telling ourselves for centuries, alchemists sought transformation by turning metals into gold. Queer existence has very often involved transformation from identity to norms and societal beliefs, rejection to innovation. And going back to alchemy, isn't that pretty incredible? How many queer creatives can you think of that have turned whatever they've gone through into something pretty incredible? Alan Cummings springs to mind. Hearing about his dad on the travel series that he did with Miriam Margolyes, where they went all around Scotland, was amazing. And then you look at the career that he's got now, and then you think back to Anne Lister, and she was told that she couldn't get different educational opportunities, the same educational opportunities as men, the ones that she longed for, to be able to carry on and sell the family's coal and own the house and her estate at Shibden. Where would she be? Where would she have been if she'd stood back and let society do what it wanted to do to her? There are some pretty incredible people that throughout history, throughout life, that speak so much of transformation and their identity. Why should people have to hide their sparkle just because they don't fit into societal norms? And that's why I always love doing these podcasts, because I dig into different things. I dig into different people and learning how people tick and finding out their passions and their creativity. I mean, another thing to think about when it comes to alchemy is sadly thinking about the AIDS crisis and the AIDS epidemic, both over here in America. I think are the 2 main ones that people know of, from It's a Sin and Fellow Travelers, starring Matt Bomer and Jonathan Bailey. And then, of course, you've got It's a Sin over here, starring Ollie Alexander as the main role, or one of the main roles, depicting how bad the AIDS crises were. But then when you think of the AIDS quilt and how a panel represented, a person who died of AIDS way before their time, way before their time. It's just incredible how much creativity can come out of sadness and wanting to belong. And everybody has a home here at Blythe Coffee Break. This is everybody's coffee break. Everybody's. Cheers to that. So let's move on to our community spill. And I want to carry on the science and innovation theme of LGBT History Month, still nodding to that because we've only 4 days out of that now. I believe we should carry on. And this is something that I wasn't expect to find out online, but so many people view Doctor Who as a queer gateway. And for me, it's so interesting to learn about all this. And of course, Ncuti Gatwa was the Doctor last year when that returned before transitioning back to David Tennant. And that attracted so much attention. So much thrill was around that season. And that's the first time that I think I've recognized queer representation in Doctor Who until I did some digging online. And I have found a pretty interesting read coming out in May this year, which is all about how queer life overlaps or has overlapped with the Doctor Who franchise. So, of course, I'm very interested in this. Me, Mum and Dad used to watch Doctor Who way back when it first came back from its ultra long break. So here we go. Patrick Mulkern is releasing a book this May 25th called You Are Not Alone, A Gay History of Doctor Who. And it's described as part social history, part biographical anthology that charts Doctor Who's gay subculture on and off screen, alongside the evolving landscape of British TV and theatre industry over the past 7 decades. Wow. So I'm intrigued. I am so intrigued because there's loads of BBC articles online seeing people interviewing people who have been influenced by Doctor Who and see it as a place where they belong. And I'm just so intrigued by this because it's amazing how a franchise can create a space for people without judgment and allow them to belong in a community, a fandom with no judgment. And it was the first time that I'd seen this overlap when I went down my research rabbit hole. And I loved it. I love seeing communities come together over something that they have in common. And fandoms do it so well, so well. I mean, you've got the Scream franchise, which does it incredibly well. You've got the Twilight franchise. And then obviously Doctor Who. And there may be others as well. Please let me know in the comments how many others you've come across, because it's so interesting. And maybe you can inspire somebody else to find that franchise because of your comment. So it's part of this community spill. And because I'm a massive soap nerd, I can't quite get over the reactions to 2 of the main storylines. And I am, of course, talking about Swala in Coronation Street, and you've got Todd and Theo in Coronation Street as well. And I have to say, it's brilliant what Coronation Street are doing with the domestic abuse storyline. I am not going to go into it because this isn't a triggering podcast at all. It's just a podcast where people can come, have a laugh, get involved in the discussions, and take it away again. But I have to admit, it's been so good to see more queer representation on screen, not just in a negative or a positive light, but the little bits and pieces in between showing both the light and the shade. And I've seen so many people say, I want the situation from Todd and Theo to be over and done with. Quick, bang, bye-bye. It's not like that in real life. It really isn't. When you've got 2 people in a relationship like that in real life, it's not done over and done with. It is exactly how it's playing out at the moment. So it's good that they are raising awareness for that, because it does happen in same-sex relationships. Absolutely. It can happen in any relationship. Then, of course, you've got Swala, which I cannot help but smile whenever I mention them because, hello, amazing. We needed that. We need the lightness that they bring onto the street. And I'm sure that there are people that are going to disagree with me when I say this, but they are incredible together. And I cannot wait for April the 3rd when they get married. It's going to be the hottest thing on TV. But I can't go past what has happened this week with the baby being left in the cot. And then one of the other members of the street, residents of the street, came along with a pram. And Carla just stood there and said, "Not another one. Please, not another one." That was one of the best moments this last week. It was amazing to see that. So the fact that Corrie have brought the comedy back and the lightness back is just amazing. And I cannot wait to see what else comes out for Swala. I really can't. And mostly that's it for today's episode. But I can't not let you go without a Blythe's Brood take. Now, all these storylines that are coming out, you've got Coronation Street, as I've mentioned, EastEnders, as I've mentioned, with Oscar Branning, Jasmine, and Jasmine's brother. Then you've got the new lesbian storyline in Bridgerton as well. All of this is bringing queer life, queer desire into mainstream. Nobody should have to explain when they hold their partner's hand down the street if they're same sex. Nobody should get stared at anymore. This shows how much further media is going when it comes to representation. This is a representation I wish I'd have had when I was younger. I came out watching Sophie Webster with Sean Powers in Coronation Street in, I think it was 2009, I want to say. I could be so wrong. And it comforts me to know that that representation is out there now. For anybody struggling with their sexuality, it's a difficult journey. It's so difficult, but I'm so pleased that it's out there. Now, let's do a future forecast. It's time to embrace the lineage of where we've come from and be proud. There were queer people before us, queer people after us, but the queer people before us paved the path for where we are now. LGBT History Month shows us that so many incredible people were brushed off and brushed to the side because they were just another historical figure. Let's show people that they weren't. And it's time to keep moving forwards and improving with queer representation, showing that abuse happens in same-sex lesbian couples as well. Just a thought for people to deal with. But yes, that is it for me this week. My coffee is almost gone, and I think I have troubled you enough. So without further ado, I will ask you, what's your coffee order? Let me know, either down in the comments or on social media at Life with Jemma Blythe. Drop me a subscribe. Also, rate the podcast too. I know you want to. Leave a glowing review and you will get mentioned as a shout out on the next episode of Blythe Coffee Break. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and I will see you soon. Bye.